I'd like to do at this point is open up to some questions from participants on this webinar. And so I'm going to ask the first question would be, should individuals with metastatic bladder cancer have a genetic analysis before deciding on a treatment plan or a clinical trial? So what is your opinion on that?
I think Andrea and I are going to agree on this. But the genomics are evolving so fast that having up-to-date information using state-of-the-art analysis techniques we think will ultimately benefit our patients. Now, whether that should be done and we should wait for the answer from one of these tests before selecting something is a more difficult choice. I think getting the test done if you have metastatic disease will ultimately poise us to be in a good position to then select therapy down the road. But in my clinics, often we send the test and then we talk about what we have available immediately, and then we sort of use the results later on to help inform our decision making. Andrea, I don't know if you.
You know, I agree. I think it's helpful in a lot of ways because it tells me a little bit about the biology of the tumor as to some mutations tend to be more aggressive than others. Some mutations tend to make the tumors more susceptible to certain therapies than others. But do we have a standard in bladder cancer? And we don't yet. In terms of we have a mutation, we're going to treat you with this therapy. We don't have that, but it definitely opens up avenues for enrolling the patient in a phase 1 clinical trial where they're testing drugs that may target that mutation. And so it opens up treatment possibilities for future trials, like Dr. Plimack mentioned, but not really do we have anything that's commercially available. You know, I get sometimes these reports from certain laboratories where they've analyzed the tumors and they're giving treatment recommendations, and those are not approved yet for that specific patient population. So I'm really surprised that they would go as far as doing that. So I think there's a lot of value into profiling the tumor and kind of understanding a little bit more about how aggressive it is and what mutations it carries, but it's not, in clinical practice, we're not using it yet to give standard therapies. We're actually using it to potentially enroll somebody in in a clinical trial that may test these mutations, that may target these mutations.
This might be a good follow-up question relating to that. Do most targeted therapies involve immunotherapy of some kind?
No, most targeted therapies don't involve immunotherapy. It's actually, targeted therapy is the opposite of immunotherapy in a way, because targeted therapies are targeting specific proteins or mutations within that tumor. And immunotherapy is not targeted therapy. It's the opposite. It's actually globally targeting the patient. It's really, it's enhancing the immune system to recognize the tumor as foreign, not any specific mutations. Although there has been some research into finding biomarkers for patients that are responding to the checkpoint inhibitors versus the ones that aren't, and PDL1 expression on the tumors or on the immune cells have seemed to be an early marker, not yet established for clinical use, but an early marker that some patients that have these the expression of this biomarker on the tumor may have more susceptibility to immunotherapy. And there's a lot of research right now ongoing to see, in the patients that don't have these proteins on the surface of their tumors or on their immune cells, can we induce these proteins by either different immunotherapies or by chemotherapy or targeted therapies. But immunotherapy and targeted therapies are not the same. They're different. And that's why combination therapy in a way makes sense, because you're taking two different mechanisms of attacking the tumor and using them together.
So how do you know if the tumor has PD-1 binding? Is it tested all metastatic cancers or just certain ones?
So PD-1 testing or PDL1 testing is something that there's been a lot of research into. There are a lot of different ways to test for it, but most of them involve taking a piece of a patient's tumor, often obtained at the time of surgery or sometimes taken as a biopsy from a metastatic site, and then applying an antibody stain and looking to see if that stain sticks. And if it sticks, that means there's PDL1 there. That's the ligand that PD-1 latches onto. So it would be logical to expect that the tumor is expressing signal, the PDL1, would be the ones that would be most susceptible to PDL1 inhibition with the checkpoint inhibitors. But actually, as it turns out, in bladder cancer and in other tumors, it's really not that clear-cut. Part of that is because the expression of PDL1 changes pretty rapidly as cancers evolve and throughout the course of treatment. So we do find that plenty of patients who are negative for this test still maintain benefit when they're treated with immunotherapies, and the reverse is unfortunately also true. Patients with very high PD-1 test staining sometimes don't benefit. So while there may be a higher proportion of patients who do well with immunotherapy who have that staining marker noted on their tumor, it's just not specific enough, in my opinion, to really use to decide whether or not to try an immunotherapy.
I agree with that, and I think one of the other problems is that there isn't one test for testing PDL1. Every company has developed their own test. So, and they haven't really been compared to see whether if you're positive through one test, does that mean that you're going to be positive through another test? So we need to standardize the PDL1 testing in order to get a little bit more information as to what the positivity and the negativity means. And I agree with Dr. Plimack. The cancer and even your body is very dynamic, depending on kind of, are you sick right now? What's going on? Are you getting chemotherapy? The expression of the PDL1 in your tumors and in your immune cells can change. And when we take tissue from when you had your surgery, which may have been years ago, it may not really represent what is going on in your tumor right now. So it's an imperfect test because of we don't have a standardization and because it can change.
I think we have time for maybe 2 more questions. So here's one. Are there any new treatments for carcinoma in situ of the bladder?
Yes, so there's a lot of trials that are currently being developed right now for patients that are resistant to the standard of care, which is BCG therapy given by the urologist. And they're actually trying to incorporate, like Dr. Plimack had shown in her slide, incorporate these immunotherapies early on in patients with non-muscle invasive disease carcinoma in situ and seeing and giving them immunotherapy either alone or in combination with BCG to see if these agents have activity in earlier disease states. And there's a lot of research efforts ongoing right now for carcinoma in situ.
And then another final question, do international trials help get a drug approved by the FDA, or does that research only have to be done in America?
That's a great question. So we look at trials from all over and all of the available data, and the FDA certainly does as well when looking to approve a trial. So it is important for clinical trials to enroll patients usually both in the United States and abroad so that it sort of has broad applicability across those countries. But absolutely the United States FDA takes into account trials done in Europe or other countries, and vice versa. The European agencies will look to trials done both in Europe and in the United States when they're looking to approve drugs.
This has been an excellent program, and I, again, want to just stress that we would have no treatments at all if there weren't clinical trials, no treatments that were safe and effective. And I think that this is a really important thing to consider as a patient. Do you have any closing words that you might want to share, either of you?
I just want to thank everyone on the call and out there who has participated in or considered a clinical trial, because these advances would absolutely not happen without our brave patients who courageously enroll in these. And while we hope each clinical trial that we offer to a patient helps that patient, we know that there's a chance that it won't. And so thank you to everyone who's participated.
I agree with Dr. Plimack. I think patients are altruistic to participate in clinical trials, and a lot of patients tell me this may not benefit me, but if it benefits patients like me or that have what I have, then at least that makes me feel good. And that's really, those are beautiful words coming from patients. And it's just a really exciting time right now in research and in bladder cancer research. When I started off 10 years ago, we really didn't have any exciting trials in bladder cancer, we had a lot of things we were looking at and we thought were exciting but did not pan out. And they were failure after failure after failure. And the fact that we have now some drugs that are shrinking the tumor, that are working, and that we can combine these and make things better is a really exciting time to be in bladder cancer research and for patients to participate in clinical trials.